we apply manufacturing overheads using a rate. So we apply overheads using a rate. That rate is usually known as the predetermined overhead rate, right? It's also known as the overhead absorption rate, right? They usually use these names interchangeably. So here's the process of applying overheads to a specific job. Number one, or step number one, you need to determine the predetermined overhead rate. So that's step number one. For you to be able to apply overheads to a specific job, firstly, you need to determine what's the predetermined overhead rate. And then step number two, you need to allocate based on actual activity that went to the job. We're going to speak about what is activity in the next slide. But what's key to remember is step number one, you need to determine the predetermined overhead rate. Step number two, you need to allocate based on actual activity that went to the specific job. So let's go. Step number one, we need to determine the predetermined overhead rate. So here's the formula. This formula is very key, right? You really need to memorize this formula and know it. Even if I wake you up at 1 a.m., you need to know this formula. The predetermined overhead rate is calculated by dividing budgeted total manufacturing overhead cost by the budgeted total activity. So you take the budgeted, very key, budgeted total manufacturing overheads cost for the year. So you divide it by the budgeted total activity for the year. So what do we mean when we speak of activity? So activity is basically us when we refer to the allocation base. It's usually labor hours or machine hours. So here we're saying we're taking the budgeted total manufacturing overhead costs for the year. We're dividing it by the budgeted total activity. It can be the budgeted total labor hours that we expect to use in the coming year across all our jobs, right? So this is what we refer to when we say activity. We're referring to the allocation base, and the allocation base is usually labor hours or machine hours. It can be something else, but most of the times these are the two most common allocation bases. So I'm going to give you an example assumptions here. Let's assume that the budgeted total manufacturing overheads for the year were 900,000 rands. So those were the total budgeted manufacturing overhead cost. And we say the budgeted labor hours, the assumption here is our allocation base is in labor hours, right? Our allocation base is in labor hours, meaning that our budgeted total activity will be the budgeted labor hours of 30,000 hours. So really important for you when you're determining the activity to say what's your allocation base. And if your allocation base is labor hours, it means that your budgeted total activity is going to be the budgeted labor hours of 30,000. So your predetermined overhead rate is going to be the budgeted total manufacturing overhead cost of 900,000 divided by the budgeted labor hours, budgeted activity for the year, which is 30,000 labor hours. Meaning that your predetermined overhead rate is 30 rand per labor hour, right? So now when you're applying your overhead to a specific job, you need to allocate overheads based on actual activity that went into the specific job. Remember, we said activity is the allocation basis. In this case, we said it's labor hours. Meaning that we need to determine how many labor hours went into job 101 during the year. And we say, oh, okay, cool. The actual labor hours used for job 101 were 100 hours only. Meaning that if we want to allocate the manufacturing overheads to job 101, we're going to say the manufacturing overhead allocated to job 101 is the 100 hours times the overhead rate or the predetermined overhead rate, and it gives us the total manufacturing overheads that are going to be allocated to job 101. Really key to remember that the process of applying overheads, step number one, you determine the predetermined overhead rate. Step number two, you allocate based on actual activity that went to the job. So in this case, we're saying this is actual activity times the predetermined overhead rate of 30 Rand, which we determined by saying total budgeted manufacturing overhead cost divided by budgeted total activity. Really important, budgeted total activity.